Zoom watchmaking meetup. Just a little bit of background on myself. I graduated college with a environmental science degree from UC Santa Barbara. After graduating, I worked at a couple of research labs doing research work because I really enjoyed working with my hands doing lab work. While working at these labs, I built an interest in watches from reading articles from Hodinkee. I'm guessing from as many of you also did. So I thought, why not combine watchmaking and the love of watches with my love of working with my hands. So I looked up schools, and I found the school I eventually ended up going to, which is KHWCC, Corpella Hoff's Watchmaking Competence Center. For those of you who know Charles and Brad of Virtual Tailor, they also went to the same school. They were a class ahead of me. And for those of you who don't know Virtual Tailor, you guys can look up bradleytaylor.ca. He's making some incredible watches in BC at the moment. Yeah, so after graduating from school, I ended up here in Toronto, and I've been working as a watchmaker in the industry for about approximately 5 years now. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about any of that?
Brandon, are you recording? Okay.
Yeah, I hit record.
I see it now. Okay, good. That's fantastic. Thanks for that introduction, Theren. And thank you so much for doing this and setting your precious time aside to do this.
No problem. It's my pleasure. All right, so let's get started then.
Okay.
I have a screen linked up. So I have a microscope here, which I set up. So today I'll be disassembling this Tudor, my personal Tudor Oyster Date. It's just a normal wine ETA 2423, and yeah. So the first step of disassembly is to take the movement out of the case, decasing. So in this particular case, we will need a Rolex case opening tool, which I have here. So this is the tool I'll be using. So first we're gonna jig up the case in this holder right here. And for this particular case, we have this key. Different keys to different movements. So this key matches the case back of this Rolex, this Tudor. And for other cases, obviously there are different tools like this one for opening the ones where you see grooves, and there are different tips for the different type of grooves. So it's the case. We just put this on, press it onto the case, and we just turn. It's yeah, just the wheel that you turn. And once it's loose, we can remove it off the holder and just by hand open up the case. All right. Now let's go back to the microscope. All right. So here we have the movement. Lighting a little bit better. All right. So in most movements, you have these movement clamps here that hold the movement to the case. So the first step would be to remove these clamps. The first step, you could either do this first or remove the stem first. I tend to do the clamps first. So because at this angle, it's kind of hard for me to do, so I'm gonna unscrew the screws off camera and then I'll bring it back under the microscope after I'm done. So now that the screws are loose, I'm gonna turn it, move these screws and the clamp. All right. All right, so in this particular movement, the stem is locked in with this screw. This screw screws into a part we call the setting lever. Not all movements have this system. There's the more modern movements have a setting lever where you can kind of just press and pull the stem out. But in older watches, vintage watches, this is a more common system. So now I'm just gonna unscrew this screw and pull the stem out. It doesn't unscrew entirely, because if you unscrew it entirely, you will disengage the setting lever. We don't want to do that at the. So now that it's loose, I can just pull, and now the stem comes out. I'll set the stem aside. We're gonna put it back in after we take the movement out. So now that the stem is out, I can kind of just put it over and the movement should fall out. All right, so now it's out of the case. There's also a movement ring. Some movements have this, some don't. It's just to keep the movement inside the movement with a snug fit. Right, so now I'm gonna put the stem back in because we need to set the date in order to remove the hands. So I just put it in and I'm gonna lock that same screw back in. Right. So now that it's in, I can set the date, set the time, and wind the watch. All right, so the next step is to remove the hands and dial. And to do that, it's the safest way is to line the hands all up. So I can either line them up so that they all line up, or just however in a straight line. All right. So there are multiple ways you can remove the hands. What I have today are two of the more common ways. One is with this tool, which we call a Presto tool. So if you imagine this to be the dial, okay. So if that's the hand, the Presto tool actually goes underneath the hand and get it in focus underneath the hand. And then when you press the tool down, it pulls the hand up while the two white plastic parts support the tool on the dial. For a lot of movements, you can do this, but in watchmaking there are always exceptions, and in particular the chronographs where the chronoseconds hands and counter hands are very tightly fit. Sometimes this would not be safe enough because you would pull the hand flank off the actual tube. So the other way is to use old school method of using hand levers. So these levers are basically just curved, extremely curved levers. So you just go underneath the hand and lever it up. All right, so I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to protect the dial with a piece of plastic. Right. This watch doesn't have a hacking second, so second and stop when I go. It's going to go under. So, and you can remove all three hands at the same time, or you can pull the hands down one by one. It doesn't really make a difference. Okay. Two. Our hand. It's hard to see under the microscope. You can take it off camera real quick. Okay. All right. So now that the hands are off the dial, the next step is to remove the dial. And in most movements, some are just friction fit onto the movement, like some Rolexes. And for this one, it's pretty common that the dial feet, which I'll show you in a bit, are screwed down by these screws on the side. Right here. That's a screw. And then there's one on the opposite side. So now we just loosen that up. Loosen it a little bit. We don't need to unscrew the whole thing. Then on the other side, one right here. I can't see it under the microscope. Okay. So now that it's loose, I can just pull the dial off. And if it's the snug fit, we can lever it with a screwdriver. Just go in between the dial and the movement and slightly turn the screwdriver. And I didn't unscrew this enough. And right, so now the dial is off. And these are the dial feet I'm talking about. So when you go repair your watch and it has been dropped, and the watchmaker tells you that you need a new dial or that your dial feet are broken, this is what they're talking about. So when there's a shock, the movement is much heavier than the dial, and so kind of shifts the dial feet. And sometimes with a larger shock, these dial feet will break, and this can stop your movement because these holes in the dial would be touching the hands, therefore stopping your. So that's one cause of shock. All right. So now that the movement is out, I'm gonna just set it onto a movement holder. Oh, first I'm gonna screw back those valve feed screws so they don't come out during cleaning. So we're gonna set the movement onto the movement holder so that we can more easily work on the movement. Keep right. All right. So the next step, what I usually do for a movement with complications, which a date would be considered a complication, is that I remove the complications first. So for this one, it's a pretty simple mechanism. Here we have the hour wheel. So we can remove that first. It's not held down by anything. Well, it's held down by the dial that the dial is on. This is the hour wheel is what the hour hand goes on top of. Then we have here the cannon pinion, which the minute hand is set on. And this is the minute wheel. So when we pull the stem out and turn, it's actually the sliding pinion, which I will show you guys later, is turning an intermediate wheel here, which in turn turns the minute wheel and turns the cannon pinion. So the cannon pinion turns the minute hand, and when the hour wheel is set on top, it also turns the hour wheel and the hour hand. And the hour wheel is then connected to this intermediate wheel, which turns the date jumper disc. And this is the date jumper, which holds it's a spring-loaded bearing that holds the date disc in place. So if there was a window here at the 5, this is what is holding the 5 in its window. And when you turn the jumper, the finger, this is what the finger is. It's also spring-loaded. So when you set the time, set the watch, it's gonna turn the date disc slowly, and see how the spring is slowly going up. Because it's spring-loaded, once it reaches that tipping point, it's gonna jump down, and thus switching the date. Right. And in this particular movement, there's a safety that's built in. So you see how this has a spring. So when you set back the time, it actually spring protects the finger from snapping off these teeth of the date disc. So you can, because this movement doesn't have a quick set, so this is kind of the quick set. So you set the date, the time back, forward again, set the next date, and then you can do that and set the date. It's a bit slower than a quick set, obviously, but it's a smart little safety mechanism. So when they tell you that not to set the date, quick set the date during the forbidden hours, this is kind of what they're talking about, because this finger is in the way of the date switch. And when you quick set, it's actually another wheel that turns this disc. And without the safety feature, the date disc will be changing with the quick set, and that in turn may snap off this finger, or it can snap off the teeth of this date disc, damage, or very rarely, but it could happen if it damages your quick set wheel. Okay. Okay, so let's disassemble. First, I'm going to take the R wheel off again. I'm just going to unscrew this screw and these two screws and this screw, and that removes these two plates that are holding down all these wheels that I just talked about. I'm gonna do that really quick off the camera. All right, now these screws are loose. I'm just going to remove them. One. Okay, so this plate comes off. And this plate has this wheel fitted on top. All right, so this is the minute wheel that I put up. And this is the cannon pinion. Not all cannon pinions look like this. A lot of cannon pinions are fitted directly onto the right wheel or center wheel, which we will talk about once I flip the movement over. And this is the setting wheel. And here we have a spring, a wire spring that's powering this bearing that I talked about. So I'm just going to use a piece of plastic to hold down the spring and I'm going to take this first. So, now control the screen. It's a bit hard to see. I'm just gonna pull it out off camera real quick. Yeah, the spring looks like this. So when it's set in, it's under tension. So many times it can jump out while you disassemble. So you have to be very careful. Right. This is the big jumper wing. All right, so now almost everything is disassembled on the dial side. We will come back to disassemble the winding and setting mechanism here in the very end because we need it to release the power for the movement. And also the Inca block shock absorber here. So now I'm going to turn the movement over. Okay. So here is the movement side. We have the balance right here. And the balance is basically the heart of the watch. It's what gives you the precision or the timing of the watch, considering that everything else is in good conditions. Um, right. And these are the setting. This is the crown wheel, and this is the setting wheel, and this is what winds the watch. So when I'm winding, I'm turning the setting, the winding pinion, which is this wheel that's vertical or perpendicular to the crown wheel, which we'll see in the very end, which in turn turns the ratchet wheel. And the ratchet wheel is connected to the barrel. The barrel is what gives all the power to the movement. So when we wind, we're actually charging the barrel. And this is the click. It keeps the power in check, but stores the power, because every time you wind, it locks the ratchet wheel in place so that the power doesn't just unwind after you release. So when you wind the watch and hear clicking, this is what's making that sound. And under this bridge is the gear train. The gear train, so this is the, underneath this jewel is the escape wheel. And then the escape wheel is connected to this fourth wheel. And the fourth wheel is what your second hand connects to. So this makes one revolution every 60 seconds. Okay. And that is true for most majority of movements. And then that is connected to the third wheel under this jewel. And the third wheel is connected to the great wheel, also called the center wheel when it's in the center. So when the center wheel is in the center, it is usually the minute hand. It's connected to the minute hand. Well, it's fitted, the cannon pinion is fitted onto the center wheel, and that is where your minute hand is connected to. So now I'm just going to unscrew the balance bridge really quick off camera. Right. So now the screw is loose. Remove the screw. And if you guys are worried about the power being released when I remove the balance, that's not going to happen yet, because underneath the balance is the pallet fork, and that is actually what's holding the power in check. So I'm just going to lift up the balance. The balance is probably the most fragile part of the movement, because besides the balance staff, which is a very, very small pivot, there's also the hair screen that you see in the oscillations. So you can just kind of tap the movement and slide the balance out of the movement. So I'm just gonna set this aside for now. We can revisit it later. All right, so now we can see the fork, the pallet fork. The pallet fork, as you can see, is charged with power from the mainspring. Because when we lightly tap the fork, you can see it impulses. So it goes up to the other side, because the escape wheel here is pushing on these two pallets, or one at a time, and pushing pushing the fork, and that impulses the balance. The balance has underneath a roller jewel, or a roller here. Fork. All right. So the balance here has a roller. This is called the roller. It is fitted onto the balance staff, which is the pivot or the axle with the pivot. That's called the balance staff. And this red jewel here is called the roller jewel. And the fork here, this opening is where the roller jewel fits into. So when it impulses, it turns that roller jewel and makes this balance oscillate like this, back and forth. And when it's when the watch is in very good conditions, this oscillation is very stable. So now we're going to release the power so that we can disassemble the pallet fork. And to do that, I'm going to wind the watch a little bit until you see the click about to jump. And then I'm gonna just lift the click out of the way and slowly release the crown and let the mainspring unwind. Okay, so now when my finger is off this crown, it doesn't move the ratchet wheel anymore. So I can turn the wheel in the unwinding direction, right? Okay, and to check that the movement is completely out of power, we can do the same pushing of the pallet fork and see how there's no impulse anymore. That means there's no more power. So now we can safely unscrew this bridge and remove the pallet fork. So I'm just gonna do that. Bridge. Yeah, sometimes there are residual energy from the spring. That's normal. As long as it doesn't spin uncontrollably, it's fine. Okay, so now that that's disassembled, we can, because the wheels are a bit blocked by the ratchet wheel, I'm just gonna disassemble the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel. And what's special about this crown wheel is that this screw is actually left-handed, meaning we turn the screw clockwise to unwind. They designed it like that because when you wind the watch like this, it's turning counterclockwise. And if it's a normal screw, this may unscrew the screw. That's why they design it so that when you wind, you're actually tightening the screw slightly. Okay. So just gonna remove those two screws. And under this wheel is the click. As I said before, the click is also spring loaded. So you can see this wire spring right here. It's to push the click into the ratchet wheel so that it blocks the ratchet wheel. And I can just grab the spring. Click. Okay, so now that's removed. I can disassemble the gear train bridge, which is this bridge right here. So that's just disassembled by these two screws. Gear train, there are multiple combinations of teeth versus diameter, and without getting too technical, that determines, along with your the length of your hairspring, the balance, the frequency of your wash. So I'll remove the fourth wheel, also called the seconds wheel. This is the third wheel. So this, yeah, third wheel. This third wheel's pinion actually connects to the dial side and is what was powering the cannon pinion, which had a wheel on it. So this cannon pinion is on the other side, and the wheel connected to the pinion of the third wheel. Escape wheel. Escape wheel's tooth shape is different from the other wheels because it's what's impulsing the pallet fork. So these teeth are in a certain shape and certain degree in order to correctly impulse. This part impulses the pallet fork with the impulse that powers the balance. Right. Now to remove the great wheel, I'm going to have to remove the barrel bridge. So I'm just gonna unscrew 1, 2, 3 screws right here. These screws out. Lift the bridge up. Now I can remove the barrel. This is the barrel. So inside the barrel is a spring, which we'll see later. Leave this on the side for now. And this is the great wheel. All right, so now this is basically the main plate, almost completely bare. It's just a winding and setting mechanism left, and we have to disassemble that from the other side. So I'm gonna do that now. I'm gonna turn it back to the dial side. So here we have the setting lever spring. This is the setting lever. This is the setting lever spring. This spring holds it in place in the setting position and in the winding position and the setting position. So when I pull the crown out, the setting lever actually moves along the spring. And underneath the spring there's a yoke. This yoke pushes the sliding pinion underneath, forward and back. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit. So when I pull the crown out, it pushes the sliding pinion forward. And this is how we connect the sliding pinion to the setting wheel here. And then push it back, push the crown back in, the sliding pinion connects to the winding pinion. And then we can wind the watch, which as we saw before, this pinion goes onto the other side and winds the crown wheel. That's it. Yeah. So now I'm just going to remove the setting lever screw, and then we can see what's underneath. Out the setting lever spring. Just remove. And you can see there's another spring-loaded yoke here. So the yoke is pushed in place by this spring, so that it's always being pushed into the winding pinion. And so when you pull and the spring clicks on this pin right here, it pushes this lever forward. But it will always want to come back. So that's why when you push the crown back in, this yoke pushes the sliding pinion. Now I'm just gonna remove the spring. If it doesn't jump, it's gonna do it off camera so it doesn't jump. Yeah, so the yoke spring is actually very thick and very has a lot of power, so it can jump very far. Let's see how much thicker it is compared to the two other springs we removed. So now I can remove the yoke. And next I need to remove the setting lever. It's screwed in from the other side. So when in the beginning, when we removed the crown to take the movement out of the case, this is what we were unscrewing. So when we unscrew this, it leaves a gap. It leaves like some play in between the movement. So right now it's screwed in, so you can't move this. But when you unscrew it, there's a space in between the setting lever and the main plate. So then the stem can slide out. And now I'm just gonna flip over the movement. And unscrew the setting lever screw. So when you unscrew it, the setting lever actually just falls out from the other side because there's nothing else holding it down. Now I can pull this screw out. It's a long screw. It's a weird looking screw, a little bit different than the other screws. Right? So now I'm gonna turn the movement over. So when I pull the crown out, the sliding pinion and winding pinion fall out. Pull the crown out. Here's the winding pinion. pinion, sliding pinion. Oops. Well, this is a sliding pinion. It has a square hull to match the square in the stem. So this here is a square. So when you turn the stem, it gives you more torque to wind. Right? And the teeth on this sliding pinion is a bit weird here on this side. That's to match the teeth on this winding pinion here. Because because the winding pinion is perpendicular to basically all the other wheels, so it needs to transfer horizontal torque to vertical. All right. Now for Inca blocks. So these are called shock absorbers. This is where the balance fits into, or the balance is set on top of. So the balance bridge also has a Inca block on top here. But it's the same thing. What it does is prevents shock from snapping the pivots off of your balance. So it's actually a setting of a jewel. There's a setting in the jewel, and it's held down by this weird-looking spring. So when the watch receives shock, the pivot pushes into the setting, and the spring here will absorb that impact and prevent the pivot from snapping. Because if it were just a regular flat jewel like this, then they just snap the pivots off and the watch is basically dead. So to remove this setting, I'm just gonna grab a small sharper tweezer. Okay. I'm gonna go in from the side. Pull the spring out. Oops. Focus. Okay, so I'm just going to push the spring forward. See how it jumped out, and then on the other side as well. And then we're gonna lift up the spring. A little door, and then we can grab the setting. Right, handshaking. It's hard to do this under the microscope. An easier way is to use some Rhodacoat. It's basically silly putty. You can just stick it on, and the jewel is off. Now I can set it aside. So the Inca block is actually in two parts. So there's the jewel on top, and then the setting underneath. So there's oil in between, which lubricates the the pinion, the pivot. Okay, so the pivot goes through this tiny hole in the setting and rests on this top of this tool. Right. So the same is on the balance. So I'm not gonna disassemble that here. And I'm just gonna set this back. It's going to push the spring back into place. So, yeah. All right. So now the movement is completely disassembled. The only thing left now is to open up the barrel. I'm going to bounce this to a safe place. The cap, the ink block, please. All right. So to open the barrel, the barrel is actually, including the spring, it's in 4 parts. We have the barrel drum, which is what you see here. There's a barrel lid, which is this cover right here. And this is the barrel arbor in the center. And then once we open it up, we'll see the main spring. So to open this up, just going to use a piece of plastic, cover it. And I'm gonna push down on the sides. You'll hear a pop. And the barrel's open. All right. So here you see the mainspring. And when you wind the watch, it's actually the ratchet wheel is connected to the screw down onto this. And there's a square on this arbor. So when you wind the watch, it turns the wheel and winds the arbor. The arbor has a little notch underneath or on the side of this arbor. There's a notch and it locks onto a hole in the spring. Let me see if I can show you guys. Or maybe I'll pick it out and then show you guys. So there's a hole and the notch goes into that hole, and when you wind, it actually tensions up the main spring. You can't get a good hold of the arbor, but you get the idea. Right, so I'm gonna take a rougher tweezer and pull the arbor out. Okay. So the notch, get it brighter. Here's that notch I was talking about. See that that right there is what hooks onto the bridle or the eyelet of the mainspring. I'm gonna remove the mainspring from the drum and show you the eyelet or hole. All right, so I'm just gonna grab the mainspring, hold it down with my hand. The mainspring is very powerful. It has a lot of power, and if you're not careful, it can jump out, and the barrel drum will go flying. A good way to take the spring out is to hold it down with your thumb on one side and alternate. Go on this side, and this side, this side, and slowly unwind the mainspring out of the barrel. So you see how I'll show you after it's out of the barrel how long and how much the mainspring is compressed into the barrel. And pull it out. This is the very end of the barrel, end of the mainspring. My microscope can't zoom out more than this, so I can show you with the camera turned back. Right, so that's the mainspring. So all of this had to fit into this. That's how your watch is powered, right? And that's the Tudor disassembly right here.
Wow, that's fantastic. You know, when you see the components under the microscope, they appear large.
Yeah.
But you know, when you think that a mainspring is this big, it's amazing.
So that's all the components of the watch.
Fantastic. Are you going to oil it before putting it back together, or?
Yeah. So I'm gonna put it in the cleaning machine first to clean off all the old oil and all the gunk that's built up, and then yeah.
I'm assuming it was due for service.
Yeah, it could use a service. I don't think I've serviced it in a while.
Well, you make it look so easy. I've done 2 horological courses, and I always struggle when I'm assembling. I cannot get the escape wheels pivots under I can line all the other wheels.
Yeah.
But as soon as I get the escape wheels pivot in, one of the other ones slips.
Yeah. It's
and I do it 4 or 5 times. So I've worked on a movement here at home, and I've assembled it, and I left the escape wheel out because it's just too damn difficult.
Yeah, it's not easy. You need practice.
Yes.
Yeah, like everything else.
I just want to say one thing about a cannon pinion. As you said, this Tudor's got a different looking cannon pinion.
Yep.
The cannon pinion is a very apt name because usually when you pop them off, they fly across the room.
Yeah. So for the regular or the other type of cannon pinion, I use the Presto tool.
Right.
So you don't, so it doesn't really fly away because you're actually catching it in the tool.
Yes.
Yeah. So
because it's held on with quite a bit of pressure onto the onto the shaft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Any questions, anybody?
How's your son's fever doing? Hi, Theren.
He's asleep because my wife's here, so I guess he's okay.
Awesome.
Good.
Thanks for asking.
That's very important, and thank you for doing this under difficult circumstance with
it's a
sick child.
Yeah.
So I do have a question about that.
Yeah.
We've been at it for about an hour, so you're trying to show all of us how you take it apart. If you had if this wasn't happening, how long would it take you to take apart that movement?
Well, for a watch that I don't know, it'll take longer. And during this assembly, we usually also check to see if there are any damage. Because this is my watch, I kind of know that there's nothing serious. But if I'm kind of taking apart a watch that I don't know, I have to examine all the parts while disassembling to check for damage, wear, and see if parts need to be replaced or repaired. Mm-hmm. So I'd say for a watch, a simple one like this one, a manual one with no real complications, probably within an hour. For more complicated watches like a chronograph or something else, it could be 2 or 3 hours. It kind of all depends because of every watch has kind of their own problems. So yeah, it kind of depends, but that would be maybe a ballpark.
Yeah, cool. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would have expected a lot more time if it's crazy complications or one of those like a really intricate or maybe even like a reduced movement, you know, where they shrink them down to make it fit. Like I would think that would take longer too.
Yeah. For smaller movements, yeah, you have to be very careful because everything is so much more fragile. The pivots are so much smaller. The hairspring is so much thinner. So it could easily be damaged if you're not careful.
Yeah. And I do have a follow-up question. What is your favorite movement to work on?
It's a good question. I've been working a lot on Rolexes recently, just from work, because we're an authorized dealer, so a lot of Rolexes come in, and it's been fun working on the Rolexes. They're not super complicated, but because I get access to all the technical information, it's a different way of working. Like they give you all the oiling points and all the data that you need to assemble and disassemble. So it's kind of a different experience for me, and I've been enjoying it. So at the moment, that's kind of the 31, 35, and well, they're all kind of similar to me. So I would say the Rolex movements for now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it was actually, on that. Where are you at now?
I'm at a private jeweler, at Humbertown.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I know which one. Yeah. I have a Penrye that came from there.
I just started sort of recently, so
Cool.
I might not have worked on that panel.
No, you didn't. This one was about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was bought 15 years ago. I didn't buy it 15 years ago. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Theren, have you worked on the Omega coaxials?
Yeah, I actually just recently did one. That was my first one, so I've only worked on one.
I've heard that one is quite difficult to align all the pivots up. Is that true? You got to put it up and tap, 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 and pull. And it either falls and settles or it doesn't. And then you got to basically start again. Is that true?
I didn't have too much trouble. The movement is actually a modified 2892.
Yes.
The one that I worked on. So it's quite familiar to me. The only difference is obviously the coaxial part, the escapement part. And what's actually the assembly part isn't that tricky. It's kind of the same. There's just, I think, one extra bridge, one extra wheel, and one extra bridge.
Right.
But the tricky part is the oiling, because it has to be so precise.
Yeah.
It's so tiny. It's a minuscule amount, like compared to a regular watch.
Yeah, too much oil kills the amplitude.
Yeah, exactly.
And in terms of the coaxial, I know Roger Smith now has improved it one step more. Instead of milling both parts on the one wheel, he's done the other part separate, because the machining of one wheel with the two different teeth sets, and the one was offset as well, was so critical. And it was very difficult to do both on one. He decided to split it and machine both parts separately and then mate them.
Yeah.
And he's got a much better result with self-starting and ease of assembly and all kinds of things. So
yeah, I think the Roger Smith Daniels version is much more refined than the Omega version, since Omega has to mass produce.
Yes.
Yeah. So so they made it much simpler, much rougher, just for production's sake. So I'm sure the Roger Smith version is much more efficient, much better.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've had a Roger Smith in my hand. It is absolutely mind-blowing. I'll share it on the group.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't seen one in the metal, so
You what?
I've never seen one in the metal.
Okay. I'll send you a pic.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions, people?
I had a sort of flip side about what your favorite movement is the Rolex movements. Is there anything you've worked on that afterward you said, oh, that was such a pain in the ass, I hope I never see one of these again?
Yeah. Oh, there are lots of those. Well, some are very common. The Salida movements, they're kind of like copies of common ETA movements, but made cheaper. Well, all of the cheaper movements are kind of a pain to work with because they use inferior material, and inferior, I guess, production procedures. So the quality isn't up to ETA or other brands' standards. So parts easily break, or it's hard to set them in place because there's so much out of tolerance. So yeah, I would say Salidas are a pain in the butt.
Okay. So I guess if you're going to sort of rank them in terms of the sort of, let's call them the generic movements, you would sort of put ETA at sort of the top rank of that, and I guess Salida and Miyota under that, I suppose, or?
Yeah, I'd say ETA, since it's so established, their production tolerances are quite good. But you have to know also that even in the same factory, they produce different grades of movements. So each way also has different grades of movement. So their lower grade is obviously also at a lower tolerance. So they can give you a lot of problems too. So for certain higher name brands, they use higher quality. But in general, yeah, I would say ETA over Salida. Yoda, I don't have that much experience. And for Seiko, they're also built kind of differently, but I would probably put them at the same level as Salida, maybe a little higher. It also depends because Salida has also higher quality movements. Hublot uses Salida movements too. And, they use obviously higher grade Salidas. So it all kind of depends. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's,
Please go ahead.
Hey, James.
Oh, I just have I have two questions actually. The first one is, you've seen a lot of watches by working on them, and because of that, do you have a grail that you're looking for? And then I have another question, is that right now there's a lot of high-end watchmakers, well, not like super high-end, but like Rolex, Omega, AP, they're all moving towards free-sprung architectures. What are your thoughts on the push towards free-sprung architectures over the traditional regulator?
For your first question, like grail to work on, well, to own and to work on, is probably the Lang datograph. That's just yeah, my dream watch to work on or to own, or both. Yeah. And in terms of your second question, I think to produce a free spun balance, it takes a higher production manufacturing quality. Like it has to be so much more precise because you can't just simply adjust it with the regulator. So it has to be perfect. The balance has to be poised. And yeah, everything has to be produced in a higher quality. So I would say going that route increases, or in general, increases the quality of the watch, because the regulator actually adds to the decrease in accuracy of the watch, because it adds friction to the hairspring, or it adds multiple you're introducing more problems to the hairspring. Like the less is more, basically. So yeah, so the less the watch has, the less parts the watch has usually is better, because there's less problems and less friction, less of everything. So it's just going to, in general, run better. Yeah.
Right, that's a great answer. What's really funny is that they make, I guess, these balances simpler, but then they add on all these other features like putting in extra barrels and
Yeah.
stuff that makes everything more complicated.
Yeah, but yeah,
and then more
yeah, but
recently,
it adds to.
yeah,
Sorry, yeah, but it adds to. That's why we love watches so much, right? Because there's so many variations to the watch. So
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, in general, the watches that last the longest are those simple watches, right? The vintage ones that are time only, or have so little complications.
Thanks.
I've
Thanks for
got I've got a sort of a question now. As a Because as a I guess as a collector, we're always looking at movement, finishing, and sort of the quality of the parts. As a watchmaker, so it's sort of two questions. What do you look at in terms of like what do you makes for a good movement? Like, is it the ease of disassembly? Is it the engineering solutions for certain things? And the second question is, since you've worked on both Rolex and Omega's latest movements, which one do you think is more cleverly engineered from a watchmaker's perspective?
So yeah, in regards to your first question, what we look at, or what I look at as a watchmaker, to determine the quality of a movement is, yeah, design, finishing, and the parts, the quality of the parts that they use. So finishing obviously is something extra because it doesn't really add to how the functions of the watch. So if they put the effort into finishing a watch, that means they're really serious, right? So you know, usually they're going to pay attention to the details. In terms of the design, there are better designs. Like there are designs that are better or work better, that serve the same purpose. So let me think if I can come up with an example. So certain watches, they add more intermediate wheels, like an Omega. I think the caliber is 1010. They add extra intermediate wheels between the setting, the winding mechanism that connects it to the crown wheel. So when you wind the watch, it's smoother because there are more intermediate wheels in between. And so when you wind it, it feels better in your hand. You're not having to wind it so hard. It's a very small detail, but when you wind it, you feel the difference. So for me, that's an improvement to the design of the watch. And in terms of your second question, sorry, what was your second question?
It was the classic
Oh,
sort of
right.
state-of-the-art Rolex versus state-of-the-art Omega in
Yeah.
terms, because I imagine both of them have they put so many hours in terms of the engineering of each component that.
For me, Rolexes are much simpler in design. They don't have that many. Well, I haven't worked on their Daytona chronographs yet. But for the GMTs and the day dates and stuff, they're quite simple. And simple to me is a good design. So compared to an Omega or the more modern ones, Omega uses a lot of ETA movements. But for their chronographs, I know I've worked on the 861, and I can't really compare a time only to a chronograph, but the design, I like Rolex more because it's so well designed, it's so simple, and it works quite well. It's withstood the time. So
Test of time, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I would have to go with the Rolex on this one, I think.
That was a fantastic presentation, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
I got a question, and it's primarily targeting to us RedBar people. Since we're collectors, we don't have our ears to the ground, and we're usually in an echo chamber where we only hear our own thoughts and our own opinions. As far as the watches that you've serviced coming into the shop or your other places of work, of these more high-end watches, meaning Rolexes, Omegas, or whatever, what's the percentage of them that are actually worn every single day and people don't take them off, let's say when they're mowing the lawn? They just wear them through everything and they just bring it to you in pieces and they're like, help. Asking for a friend.
I guess it's maybe 30%. I'm just making a percentage off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people bring it in when they have encountered problems. Not many people bring in for regular service. There are kind of two schools of thought in terms of watchmakers. Some people say to bring it in for regular service. Some watchmakers say just to bring it in when there's something wrong. Personally, for a modern watch, I would probably say just bring it in when you feel that something's wrong. For vintage watches, I would probably bring it in for regular service, just because if parts wear out, it's going to cost you much more to repair, because parts are scarce. Parts might need to be manufactured by hand, And for modern watches, basically for most brands, it's gonna cost you the same money, whether you have parts broken inside the watch or not. It depends on the brand, but a lot of brands actually just swap the movement out. So no matter what happens to your watch, it's the same thing for your cost. I used to work at LVMH, tag, and that's what we did for most of the watches. So we just swap out the movement. But yeah, for vintage watches, that can't happen because we don't have access to all those parts. So yeah, regular service will only do you good.
Good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking.
Great. Well, we've been going for 1.5 hours now. I think we should let Theren rest.
Yeah.
Thank you, Theren. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Let's just do a quick wrist check. Well, Theren, your watch is in pieces now.
Right there.
Will you be able to record yourself putting it together, and we'll just play that through on another meeting? Is that possible?
Possibly. I could try.
Okay.
But assembly will take much longer since I have to oil and everything.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, okay. Maybe. Yeah. Well, we'll talk personally about that.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's do a quick wrist check and then say goodnight. Who's going first?
I'll
Brandon.
go first. My profile photo is what I'm wearing right now. I'm in bed. That's why my camera's not on. I can't afford the psychiatry bills for all of you by forcing you to see me in bed. So that's what I got on.
Okay.
So the question is, do you actually wear the Omega to bed?
Right now, actually, no. My Garmin is on my
there
wrist
you go.
because it measures everything else. But the Seamaster had been on my wrist the entire day, as Mark and Brandon can attest in one of the group chats.
Yeah,
so.
I do sleep with a watch on. The watch that I'm happen to be wearing that day will usually come to bed with me. Yes.
No kink shame here.
Yeah, I'm guilty of doing the same unless it's got a leather strap on it, and because I usually forget about it on my wrist. I'll just go to bed and it's there, but a leather strap for me is hard to ignore.
All right, so let's see what we're all wearing. Atul, what you wearing?
I've got a Helios.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. It's called the Puck.
Oh, that's
cool.
Yeah,
I know that one.
Yeah. It's just fun.
Okay. Brandon, what you wearing? Can I guess? Oh,
Engineer.
okay. Very
Yes.
good. Portuguese chronograph. Rich, what you wearing?
Grand Seiko.
Nice.
Lovely. Jordan.
Oh, resins, but new buckle.
Oh, nice.
Oh.
Dave.
Cool.
What you got on?
Hamilton khaki field.
Lovely. Theren, we know. James, what you wearing?
This is the Exciton or the Exciton. This is the watch that I've designed, and I somehow got it made.
Oh, wonderful.
Nice.
Tom?
Got my Speedy.
What?
Ooh.
That's a surprise. That was unannounced.
Got it. What month are we now? April. So got it middle of February.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I'm pouring a whiskey to that. Well done, Tom. That's big congratulations.
Thanks. And I haven't been checking Chrono 24 much recently, but I think prices have been going up. So I think I might have got it just in time.
They are going to go up. There is no question that they are not going to go up. Who's next? Brad? is offline or no picture. Well done. Congratulations, Tom.
Yeah, cheers.
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 Ah, what's that? Okay. So do anybody just want to carry on chatting? Brandon, I think
Mark,
you can stop,
I'm gonna stop recording.
stop recording.